welcome to part 2 of our discussion of Deerhunter's original first album, Turn It Up. We'll be picking up from Oceans, the first track on the later half. Let's get started.
Trent and Dave, listen to the song.
All right, we are back with Oceans.
Yeah.
What did we like about that?
What did we like? I did like a few things about it. What I didn't like, I'll get right into it. I thought that the drums actually took away a lot.
Interesting.
Of cool ideas in this song, because this is an ambient space.
Yes.
That they're definitely trying to create.
Right.
And the problem with the drums is they have a lot of similarity to the other tracks in the album.
Yes.
I think at one point there's almost the exact same rhythm here as was in Tech School.
Kind of, yep.
And so this can contribute to that sort of samey feeling that I was talking about. I think the beginning and the ends of this song, when the drums aren't playing, are great.
Right.
I love that sort of explorative space that they're trying to make a soundscape.
Which is funny because I think that's a ton of Moses, the drummer. I think that's a ton of his influence. I think there's all kinds of weird, I don't know if they're samples or pre-recorded bits or just weird tape sounds or whatever that are being kind of...
Yeah, sorry to get on your boy.
Almost everyone in this band is my boy.
Okay.
Yeah. Or they're my boy or they're my person. And so, sorry, what I was trying to say is... Yeah, it's covered in these, I don't know if they're tape loops. I don't know if it's weird, reverse delay noises or pre-recorded bits, if it's field recording kind of stuff. I'm not sure what it is, but there's just layers and layers of it. And
layers,
to me,
tons.
And to me, that is that's Moses being okay, we're gonna create some texture now in this. And it's cool because then the song kind of emerges from that.
Yeah, so And that's exactly what I feel happens. It definitely starts at the beginning where there's a lot of buildup going up, and then when the drums come in and they start just laying down a rhythm throughout most of the song, most of the middle of the song, there's a lot of stuff that sort of gets built up beyond the drums, and it does sort of mix and muddle together.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's lyrics. I know that there's a bunch of they're just saying oceans over and over and over again, but sort of there's a lot of layers and ideas and that kind of thing. You can't really hear any specific thing. And when the drums leave, immediately when the drums leave, you start to hear every little piece, Bradford's screaming oceans over and over again, ping-ponging back and forth between my ears because he's doing it twice at the same time. And then there's a sort of chime that one guitar is doing on those two notes.
Two notes over and over again? Yeah.
Two notes. And then there's a melody that another guitar is doing.
Yeah. Bow, 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 now.
So that is very cool. And at the end of the song, they're all slowing down, sort of like a broken clock.
Yeah.
When I think of ambient music, this is sort of the highest bar I can set. But it's Tomorrow Never Knows, right?
Yeah. That song rules.
So when Tomorrow Never Knows by the Beatles, if anyone doesn't know, it's sort of you are trying to create sort of an ambient space.
Yes.
And you're trying to just create a room, and there's a whole bunch of stuff washing in over you around your head sort of thing. And I feel not necessarily Moses, but just the drums, just the drum beat.
Yep.
I think takes away from that just because we've already heard it. We've already heard those beats, those rhythms in most of the other songs.
Yeah. The kind of 4 on the floor stomp snare with then the offbeat hi-hat kind of thing.
Yeah, it's not a drum beat that makes you think of an ocean, really.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know what makes you think of an ocean, but when I think of an ocean, I'm certainly not thinking about heavy driving drum beats. Heavy driving drum beats are going on, I'm thinking about drag racing.
Right.
That is almost farthest away from the ocean that I can get.
Right.
So it's called Oceans. And they're saying oceans a bunch, so I would assume that the ambient space that they're trying to create has something to do with that.
Yes.
And it does in the beginning and the end.
Yeah, I think it's like a storm out on the sea kind of like brewing and then dissolving, I think is what they're going for.
Oh, yeah. There's certainly that effect at the very end of the song. Sort of like you're coasting out to sea sort of thing on a driftwood.
Yeah.
I get that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got a bit of Tom Hanks vibe sort of thing.
Tom Hanks. I was thinking of like Titanic. You're just hanging out on the door there.
I was I was thinking of Castaway.
Yes. Better movie in my opinion. The last thing I'd like to say on this is I am very confident that this entire song is always improvised. Because I know Bradford is almost always doing that kind of like dual vocal thing that we've talked about before, where he's doing two takes independently and smashing them together. But this one in particular, they are so off that I think even in each take, he's kind of coming up with the vocal delivery as he's doing it. So I'm willing to bet that when they did this live, it was just kind of like a live jam that they just kind of let it go for as long as it could kind of sustain and then just kind of like peter out.
So yes, so that is absolutely the idea behind avant-garde music.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That is absolutely sort of just like a collective experimentation, not necessarily playing a song that you have written, but sort of creating a song spontaneously.
Yeah.
And there's a later song that we'll get into that has much more of that.
Yep, I think I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah. This one's interesting. I think just to me, and this at this point is entirely opinion based because like, hey, if it sounds like Oceans to you, I mean, I can't really deny that. I don't know what your ocean sounds like. Right. It could sound exactly like this.
Yes.
In this case, though, I do think that just those driving beats sort of take away from the ambient space that they're trying to make.
Right.
But yeah, this is a good idea and sort of like a step in a different direction than every other song in the album. So dynamic movement here is like A+.
Yeah.
From the last song.
For sure. It's a big contrast in, the dynamics and the change that the song goes through. Yes.
Shall we get going to Basement?
Let's listen to Basement.
Yeah. Let's go down.
What's in the basement?
What's in the basement? We'll find out.
Trent and Dave, listen to the song.
Okay.
We might need to clean up the basement just a little bit.
Yeah, what's in the basement, Dave?
I mean, it's definitely a different tone and a different speed and a different like mood from the rest of the song. So like, yes, more song to song dynamics. Yeah, which is good. And this is, I think, like up to this point, there's been like sort of like one thing or one band member that has carried like every tune. And this song is definitely carried by the drums.
Yeah, I could see that.
Like, absolutely, there is the most dynamic movement here has to do with Moses,
right?
Because like it's not that same like driving drum beat. It doesn't have it's very slow and methodical. Like you get the triple hits on the snare, and you get like it starts with the bass and the snare, sort of like interchangeably, and then they repeat that section. He adds in the hi-hat a little bit better. And then like he goes into double time. Like he actually like starts double timing on the hi-hat. And that it goes like in such a good way to make a song more dynamic, because up to this point, everything kind of felt, especially in the drums, everything kind of felt like it was fairly static. Like the drums were playing basically the same beat throughout the entire song. It wasn't, it was a little bit difficult to like sort of like break down a different or like a change in drum dynamics or like groove dynamics. I guess you could say. And so like this is something that I'll talk about more, just because like I'm talking about dynamics again. This is like, dynamics aren't just volume. Like every single thing can contribute to dynamics. So like every instrument can contribute to dynamics. The fact that this song in general is completely different than Oceans, which was completely different from Language Violence.
Yeah.
That is positive dynamics. Mm-hmm. So like the idea of switching something, like you're switching the bass drum to a hi-hat.
Yes.
That is a very large dynamic switch.
Yes.
And it's very like big change in the tone. So I like hearing those ideas. Like I like hearing that in drummers. And I know this is like the first album, but like I like hearing that because it's like, okay, they're getting something. They're sort of like getting it. Yeah. So like when you go from like Adorno to Tech School, there's a little bit of switch in the dynamics because of that riff, that Devo riff at the start.
Yeah.
But then it sort of feels like it sort of melds into like the same song because it has like a lot of the same energy, a lot of the same like fast movement, fast speed, vocal layers. So that's why those kind of sound static, whereas like this is a lot different from Oceans.
Yes.
This song is a lot different from Oceans. So that like automatically I just like this song.
Yeah.
Because like I kind of just like I like the change. I like what Moses is doing on drums, and I think like as a foundational instrument, as a foundational like part of a song, like the drums really need to carry a lot of movement and a lot of dynamic movement, and I think they do that pretty well.
Yeah.
So like I think that Basement is sort of like a step in like a better musical direction for this band.
Right.
Sort of thing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think this is, definitely the most melodic they've sounded so far, other than the Blitzkrieg burst on Tech School.
Yeah.
And I really like, actually, the fact that there's, like you said, there's space. Things breathe at the very beginning.
Right?
Where, and
Yes.
they're doing just like upstroke guitars, so then the bass has a little pocket to sit in.
And like the vocals are like are sparsed over, so like he's saying those things on the hits of the drums. Like I don't what are the lyrics here?
Oh, okay. So the lyrics are tricky.
Okay.
They're very
I'll be in the basement.
Yeah, so they're very vague, and to my understanding, I think what's going on here is, I'll put a slight content warning on this.
Okay.
Bradford, in an interview that I showed you, which is between this album and Cryptograms coming out, he talks a lot about like kind of the awkwardness of like discovering your sexuality as a teenager kind of thing is and so to me I'm pretty sure this song is like talking about that, where I think he had some kind of I shouldn't say he, it could be a character, it could be anything, right? I think he's talking about an experience of someone having like a friendly encounter that then is like turning towards this direction, and maybe it's a bit overwhelming and a bit new and scary to them.
Like another horror song. Like this is another horror movie for sure.
Exactly. And I think it all just happens really quickly, and it's very kind of shocking. And I think especially when it goes into the repetition of the what's in the basement part, and when the bass starts doing these like dives down where it's just like sliding down into the notes every time, that's like the like your gut dropping thing where you're like, whoa, this has all happened way too fast. And that's what I get out of that. And so that's where I think the two contrasting like vibes and sounds going on in the song are, between like the kind of like relaxed kind of, like I said, upstroke guitars and like spacious kind of verse things, and then it just drops back into the like scared, freaked out horror show noise jam thing.
It's creepy like front to back. Yeah. Like this song has a very like slow and sort of that like serial killer vibes where like you're with somebody who seems okay, but like there's red flags flying all over the place.
Right.
And then, it starts to ramp up and things start to get a little bit more violent at the end. So I would say that this is another horror movie song for sure.
Yes.
And it does try to actually like paint that scene of something starting innocent but strange. and then turning into, oh no, the strange thing was actually bad.
Right.
Like the basement's kind of not a good place that you want to go to. Let's not go to the basement. Let's go somewhere else.
Right. Yeah. I now know it's in the basement, and I wish I didn't. Yeah.
You want to strap into Young Layer?
Yeah. Let's pop on over to Young Layer here.
Trent and Dave, listen to the song.
Okay, Young Layers. Let's peel back the layers. What do we think about that one?
Or do you want to have more in-depth discussions about avant-garde music?
Oh, I mean, it may be warranted. How many recorders are in avant-garde music?
Well, I think there's just one recorder in this song.
Is it one? It feels like many tracks of recorders going on, or it's just a ton of delay. I don't know which.
I don't know if there's more than one, but it does seem like you hear a line played on that recorder. Like they'll do like the trills on the notes, and then they'll play like those few notes that like you can play on a recorder without really trying all that much.
Yeah,
which is fine. And I want to stress this: they are playing what they can on the instrument, but they're using that to like explore that space. In this sort of like, this is avant-garde. This is also like an ambient song as well. They are making an ambient space. They're not using vocals. They're just using the drums. The drums and the bass are the only things that are structured. They're the only things that are playing something that is set, and then everything else is sort of layered on top. And the reason that I say that is just because like you hear that line on a recorder or a flute or I'm not exactly sure what it is. Yeah. But you hear that exact same thing over and over again. So I kind of feel like they sampled it. They took that and they moved it over to another part of the album of the song because you're also hearing like the most egregious guitar scratching squeals.
Pick slides is what those are called, where you just take the pick and you just slide it along.
But just not even just like pick slides, but also just like plucking at the tiny strings at the top of the guitar and like behind the bridge, behind the bridge and that kind of thing. So like this is definitely sort of just like this is a free jam for sure.
Yeah, it's a lot of texture going on. We talked about texture with a capital T.
Yeah, with several Ks.
Yes, because the guitars are almost exclusively doing what you're describing, where they're just creating sounds. One thing I do like though, and I will point out, my boy Josh, who's on bass there, he does a really cool thing where he does a bass line where he's playing notes, and then he just like makes percussive sounds on a deadened string. Yeah. And he's just like, he is really trying to play the role of like, I'm a bassist, so I provide some melodic content and I provide some rhythm kind of thing. And I think that helps this song a little bit because it kind of like carves out, again, like a little pocket for someone else to do something. Yeah. Although it's really kind of, there's no real, like you said, defined part that goes over that. It's just kind of a smattering of things that go over top of it.
Yeah, I like it too. And I do feel like that is sort of like the point. It's to make the listener participate in the song, not necessarily like just let it wash over you. So like, just like what things do you like? What things don't you like? So do you like all of the guitar squeals that are going on, the guitar slides and that kind of thing, the picking at weird parts of the guitars? There's a bit of like vocal stuff going into it, I think there's just like a bit of just like getting really close on the microphone and making those like really low guttural sounds.
Yeah, I think so.
And like what works, what doesn't. This is what the band is doing. Like this feels improvised. It does.
Yes. Oh, I think it was for sure.
It definitely feels like the most structured ideas are coming from the drums. Yeah. Because you hear that those snare bass hits more than once in the song, where like he hits the rim of the snare and he hits the bass drum like twice, da, 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 da. And then like the double time on the snare rim. That happens multiple times in the song. So like it feels like the drums are laying down the structure where everything else is sort of getting layered on top. And that is, for the most part, improvised, and they're kind of just like putting it together and figuring out like what works, what doesn't. So yeah, it's sort of just like free experimentation and pushing a little bit of the boundaries of sort of that space.
Yes. It feels a little bit almost like, hey, let's do something experimental. Let's put a recorder on the album. And I feel like a lot of times bands, when they're searching to be like, how do we do something different? How do we do something that really like takes you out of what's already been happening kind of thing? They're like, well, why don't we just try a different instrument? And I think it's really interesting that, recorder or flute, whichever it is, was the one that was chosen for that.
Yeah, and like avant-garde music doesn't necessarily need to be like it doesn't always need to be unstructured. Mm-hmm. And like it doesn't always need to like there's a misconception where like, oh, they're just doing whatever they feel like, or they're not even thinking about it. No, they're thinking about it.
Yeah.
They're not playing whatever they want on the recorder. They're playing a few specific notes, the notes that they can play.
Yeah.
Probably, most likely, and that is intentional. So like they're intentionally playing like a certain thing on a recorder, just putting it into the music, seeing what it does to the sound.
Yeah. So
there are tons of layers in this music. Are they young? Are they old? I don't know. I'm not sure whether or not like the title has anything to do with the construction of this song. This does seem a lot like a free jam, like just a free rock jam.
Yeah. To my best interpretation, this kind of feels like an interlude between Basement to get you over to Death Drag. I think that's kind of what it is.
And as such, this is an interlude to our listening of Death Drag.
Excellent. Love it. Let's go.
Trent and Dave, listen to the song.
All right, that was the finale and magnum opus to Noise, Death Drag. What do we think about Death Drag?
I feel like I ran a 5-mile marathon, dude. I'm sweating. Oh my God.
It certainly feels like the longest track. I don't know if it is. I haven't looked at the times of each one.
It is absolutely 6 minutes long.
Is it? Oh man, okay. I knew I was right with that.
It is absolutely the longest track, but like it's not just like long in time, but it's also just like long in wind and long in
that's a great description.
And long in just like taking a very long punch to the face as repeatedly as possible. Like it's just so much noise and aggression and work. It is definitely just like a marathon to listen to, especially at the end.
Yeah, the end especially is like, it's unstructured noise for a little while. Like it's just both guitars feeding back and just generating as much kind of chaos as they can. And then especially at the very end there, the bass is just pedaling one note. Like there's not even any type of like underlying groove anymore or anything. It's just like, no, we are holding on this and we are just going to make it as loud as we can.
Yeah, this is a classic Deerhunter Noise Factory song. I think I can say that now as being the veteran turn it up listener at this point.
That's right.
And like there's a bunch of songs that sort of like have this sort of format. I would say Adorno, Tech School, Pawns, and Language and Violence. Mm-hmm. For the most part, they have the same format. So like there's a body. You could say there's a general body of the song. In this one, there's a riff that goes on, the drums and the bass line up, and the vocals come over this, and in the body, there used to be a dead man. Yeah. That is the body of the song. I used to be a dead man, and it sort of like builds up. And there's like a normal groove in this section, and they sort of like build on each other to make a groove here. And then in the next section, there's, I guess it's a shout section where he's just saying, death drag, and then like a riff that follows or precedes the shout. Like in Tech School, it might have preceded the shout, or in another song, it might have come after the shout, the riff and like the coordination between the drums and the bass.
And I actually kind of like that little bit there, that where it's like like I said about leaving pockets for stuff. It's like the death drag with the vocals and snare hitting at the same time.
Yeah.
And then the bass does a little like tag on the end. That's like the do like the little descending bit at the end.
No.
Like that's a nice little
It's
hook
good.
there. Yeah.
No, and like I think these are like hallmarks of this kind of song now. Like that.
Yeah.
That is sort of like their form. This is for me, at least at this point, this is a classic Deerhunter song.
Up to this point in their sound, yes, this is like a prototypical Deerhunter song.
And then after the shout, there is a noise break.
Yeah.
In tech school, it was sort of like the break that followed the Blitzkrieg Bop section.
Yeah.
In this one, it's just everything just like stops. The drum beat stops, the bass beat stops, and they just like hammer notes as fast as possible.
Yep.
Bradford screaming in both of my ears again. And like I think at one point Bradford is just like going really close to the microphone and he's just doing one of those like high falsetto tones that he's making. And then it seems like it's like moving, like they're pitch shifting it in post.
Might be.
So like these are very interesting explorative spaces for noise. Like they sort of like create a foundation and then create an environment in which you can just hit with a sledgehammer and just like take down the drywall and just like scream at the top of your lungs and just say death drag, death drag, da na 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 na, death drag, death drag, and then just like hit every drum on your drum set and hit every or like not worry about hitting frets on your bass guitar anymore and just like strum the strings as loud and as violently as you can.
Right. Generate as much sound as possible, regardless of what the content of it is. I think this is probably a good point to like transition into what we think of the album as a whole, because we're kind of talking about this like in summary with a lot of the other songs, because like you said, there's a lot of similarity going on between songs.
Yeah, that is kind of what I would say. Like the album is fairly static. There's not too much dynamic movement. Like the biggest dynamic movement is sort of like just after the middle.
Yeah.
Like as an album as a whole, like it starts off with a very ugly chord and ends with Bradford saying "fuck you."
Yes. And I don't know if he's talking to the engineer, if he's talking to somebody else, or if he's just like in general mad
Just,
that like he thought something didn't go. Yeah.
You.
Right. I don't know exactly what he's directing that anger towards, if anything at all, but yeah, it's a great little button to put on the end of that, or ribbon to tie at the end.
Yeah, and so like what I said in the beginning, where like the first song felt like a hazing ritual.
Yeah.
When I get to the end of the album, it feels like this album is a hazing ritual.
Right.
It's very intense. It's very aggressive. It never lets up. There are some points where it's just like, okay, we're going to do experimental free art rock now.
Yes,
it's just like,
for sure.
Whoa, I was listening to this very angry horror slasher film, and now I'm in the ocean with sort of like there's no breaks sort of thing.
Yeah.
And when I sort of talked about like the album art and saying like this is meant to piss off a certain type of people, this is definitely meant to like just make the people who would say that this sucks, people who would say that this is shit, to say that this is shit.
Right.
So that they can get turned off and leave, sort of thing.
Right.
Because it feels like you're not willing to take a hit. This band kind of doesn't want you to listen to it anyways. This is the impression that I'm getting from this album, at least.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. Yeah, if you're not willing to go through like a little bit of a struggle to get to your music kind of thing, then they're not interested in you. Like, yeah, like you said, you have to take a hit in order to listen to this album.
That's definitely what I felt like after listening to Death Drag. It's just like body blow after body blow, just death drag, death drag, death drag, death, all the way to the end. And I think that was the intention of this album.
Yes, I would agree.
So in that sense, I think this album has done its job to a phenomenal degree. to an outstanding degree. So much so that their fan base won't listen to this album, that they won't listen to this album. So like they haze themselves out of it. It's just like entirely just like so violent and horrific that it's just like, yeah, I kind of don't want to listen to this anymore.
Right.
And I will say that I kind of don't want to listen to this anymore. Right.
That is fair. And like we said off the top, like when we talked about guitar skronk, like that's a thing that like if you're into that, there's lots of that here, but most people aren't really going to enjoy it. And they intentionally don't search for a way to bring people into the skronk. They're like, we want the skronk to drive people away. So we're going to give you tons and tons of skronk. Yeah.
And like, you can find people who just love this music. I'm sure of it. And to anybody who's listening to and says like, oh, this is my shit. Good on you. Like,
hell yeah, man.
Hell yeah. Just like, there's a lot of things to like about these songs. There's a lot of like good ideas that are going into it, and I'm excited to see where they go with it.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil too much, but they do add another member, which I think adds a little bit more versatility to their sound. And I think they develop as songwriters. And I think there is actually, like, as much as Bradford says he doesn't necessarily plan lyrics going into songwriting, I think there's a lot more intention in the structure of the song and a little bit more adherence to, like, traditional song structure of, like, verses and choruses and stuff. A little bit, just a little bit of that influence.
So what was your favorite song on the album?
I think I have to give it up to Tech School, to be honest.
Cool.
I think Tech School is my favorite. I really wanted to go Adorno because
Adorno's
I
mine.
like. Oh, okay, good. Because I do really like the bass groove on Adorno. Like, I'm a sucker for dance punk. It's such a fun combination of like, let's dance, but also be like a bit broody and edgy. And for whatever reason, that just appeals to me. I think that's just a lot of fun. But I think I like Tech School the most because for me, I love the like we keep talking about, the blitzkrieg burst in the middle there of just like, we're going to co-opt traditional things and then completely toss them aside, being like, we don't even need it. We don't even care about this. We're so far beyond this. And I think that's such an interesting little choice to stick in there. And again, you know, a lot of the grooves are kind of similar, but like the groove in that one too is a lot of fun as well. And I like almost the amateur quality of the Tech School dropout call and response. Like the drop out in the background is so far off mic and is like it feels like it was recorded in maybe one take with like a few of them together. And there's something endearing about that. I really like that. Yeah.
I like Adorno a lot. I think as far as just like its transition from the first song and like the way that it sets up the groove, and also just like I'm a sucker for multi-level narratives. So I like the idea that the double vocals was planned for this song, and sort of like I like how it feeds into the lyrics and like the vocals, like how the lyrics and vocals sort of just like complement each other and make each other better. Yeah. The groove, like I really like a lot of the horror movie grooves. And like this one definitely has, like Adorno definitely has that minor creepy vibe to it. And the entire song I think works together. That's what I like about this one as far as like the songs on the album. I think the entire song of Adorno is working together and making a very specific mood and theme and dynamic. And I think that's really cool.
Right. Yeah. There's like a cohesiveness to it. That is cool.
What was your least favorite song on the album?
Okay. My least favorite song on this album is absolutely Young Layer. And for me, it's just the stacks of recorder going on. And like, I get that it's supposed to be like a you know, just kind of a sound collage that transitions you from one song to another kind of thing. But something about the timbre, the sound of the recorders is like
that word.
Yeah, it's like nails in my ears. I find it like brings back flashbacks of like trying to play recorder in elementary school and like all like the screeches and like they're so like the pitch on a recorder is so unstable most of the time.
Oh yeah.
So it's just like, the fact that like the notes aren't even like really consistent in their pitch. It's just that one gets to me for sure. The first time I heard it was like giggling to myself a little bit, being like, oh my God, they really went with it with the recorder. They are going, they're, putting in all their chips. They're going all in on recorder on this song, and that's a bold choice.
Yeah. I would say that like my least favorite is Oceans.
Okay.
For sort of the same thing. I just think the drums take away from the ambient space like so much. Yeah. And it kind of took me out of it, sort of thing. I think as far as like Young Layer goes, the reason that is like definitely like was in contention for least favorite song, but the reason that it's not for me is just because like it does its job, I think, as far as like a tool in the album to like transition from one song to the other, a huge change in mood and dynamics. There's no real whiplash. It's very similar from start to end, whereas in Oceans, I think it was just the whiplash from like starting with an ambient space and then going into a driving drum beat and then like going back into an ambient space. Like two things that I like that were kind of muddled by the drums. So like I liked more of Oceans than Young Layer, and I was sort of let down more by Oceans than Young Layer. So I guess that is the reason why it is my least favorite song.
Fair. I disagree, but I understand your reasoning.
Yeah, that is, I think as far as like my notes on the album, that is where I conclude with my thoughts. That is definitely Deerhunter, Turn It Up for me.
Yes, that is it for me as well. That's how I feel about it.
I would say at this point though, Turn It Up by Deerhunter, probably the best Deerhunter album that I've ever listened to, for sure.
Yeah?
I would say it's number 1 on my list.
Wow, that's a pretty bold ranking. Where would you say among your least favorite Deer albums it ranks? Deerhunter albums.
Oh well, I don't. We don't really do least favorites. I think this would have to be the best Deerhunter album I've ever heard.
Wow, high praise. If we were trying to look for like a pull quote to put on a cover of something, that would be it. Yeah.
This is definitely the best one I have ever heard in a long shot.
You're right. Oh yeah, for sure. But yeah, I'm excited to bring you into this world now that you've been through the hazing ritual that is Turn It Up, and we can move on to Cryptograms, where I feel like there's going to be a lot of evolution in the band's sound, and it's what I would say is like the first like officially acknowledged album, and it's for a lot of people it is their true first debut album.
Oh, cool.
Where we see the band in kind of the context and like the form that they're going to carry on as for a little bit.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm excited to go through that with you and to have everyone join us for that.
Excellent. Would you like to talk about how Deerhunter has performed this live?
Yeah, so for how the live show is at this point, in my research, I talked to you about this, but there isn't really any live footage that I can find of them playing songs from this album. I think Bradford says they made this album and then their follow-up Cryptograms in the same year, so I don't think there's a very long stretch of time where they're playing these songs exclusively to begin with.
Right.
So I was able to find one video that is from just before Cryptograms is released in 2005.
Yeah.
So I'm going to use the things that we're seeing in that video to kind of inform what I can imagine is the live show happening around these songs.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And like, I've watched that. I've watched that performance, and it is like, it does still like have that same energy, at least, that I've heard from this album. The way that Bradford carries himself on stage and like the performance that he gave, at least in that video, is very reminiscent of like the album art, and sort of just like that very aggressive, very violent, or not necessarily violent, but just like in your face, just asserting a certain theme and mood. Like,
Yes.
I believe, like, he was talking about a story like,
Some real 7th grade shit? Is that what you're talking about?
some real 7th grade shit.
Yeah.
And the story has to do with, like, I don't know, like measuring dicks or something like that. Or
Yeah, it's a whole thing.
It's a whole thing, but like, and then he starts to unbutton his pants, and I was just like, okay, wait, is he actually going to do it on stage? Is he actually going to whip his dick out on stage? Is that what is that where we are? What we're doing? And then he sort of reveals himself in a dress.
Yes.
And sort of like jumps out of his loose t-shirt and loose jeans into like a frilly white blouse. And I'm just thinking to myself, okay, wait, what was the difference?
Right.
What's the difference between what I thought was going to happen and what actually happened? Sort of thing. And it's just like, it's really interesting. It's a really interesting like performance piece because like the idea that you, there are two ideas. It's like one of them is absolutely taboo. The other one is like shouldn't be, but is. So it's like a really interesting performance statement that's going on stage, and it reminds me a lot of the album art and like a lot of the songs on this album. So like, yeah, I definitely get how that energy can translate live, or at least like what that live energy was like when they were performing these songs.
Yeah. I think this is incredibly effective at just grabbing people's attention and cutting through like the noise and distraction and conversations that happen at a live music venue at that stage when you're like just playing like bars and small clubs and stuff.
Yeah.
Like you have to really do stuff to make people stop what they're doing and come over and look and see what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think Bradford is like a master of this already early on, where he makes so many big actions, I think is key as well. Like, I think a lot of people neglect how much of live music is a performance. Like there's, visual is 50% of it. And a lot of people just kind of ignore that. And so I think, the fact that he has a planned costume change partway through that you're talking about, where it's a fake out, where you think, you know, he's going to expose himself on stage.
It's a huge fake out.
Yeah, and then also does stuff like, standing up on the drum kit, holding the microphone in his mouth with his arms stretched out and just yelling into it or making, like we talked about, those kind of weird vocal guttural noises.
Yeah, just like that high falsetto tone that just like goes straight into the microphone and automatically distorts itself.
Yeah, exactly. I think that stuff is really cool. And then people would all of a sudden look over and be like, wow, that guy is in a dress on the stage with the microphone and just about yelling into
his general presence as well. Like he is, at least in this album, like I know, or like in this performance, you've told me about sort of like his condition.
Yes.
But he is gaunt and he is very like thin on stage.
Right. Yeah. Just his general appearance is a bit striking as well for people. So I think that plays into it. And from what I can tell around this time, it seems like the volume of the band is incredibly loud.
Yeah. Couldn't hear too much of the music really on this video at least.
Right. And so I think because you can tell how easily the guitars are feeding back. And like you said, when Bradford is really giving it to the microphone, it is also kind of creating a distorted tone just based on the volume that's being put into it. And so I think that's also a way that they just command attention, where they are so loud that you couldn't possibly have a conversation with the person next to you. You are just like, we are watching the show because there's nothing else we can do. And they reward that.
Maybe just maybe also kind of like this album, just a little bit of a hostage situation. I don't know.
Kind of, yeah. Exactly. I kind of was watching this and I'm like, why do I think this is successful? And I kind of came up with 3 criteria I think makes for good like live punk music, I think.
Okay.
And I am basing this on nothing other than my own opinion. But I think there's 3 things that you need to deliver on, and I think Deerhunter checks all the boxes at this point.
Yeah.
One thing is I think you need confidence. You need to go up there and act like you belong and immediately reward people for paying attention.
And like if there was someone in the band that didn't have confidence, Bradford just like lifts that person on his shoulders and just
right. And that's what's funny too, is in this video especially, a lot of times the other guys have their backs to the crowd, and it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter because Bradford is just like all over the microphone stand, all over the microphone, walking around, jumping around. Yeah, it is very much just like all the lights are on Bradford. So
yes,
it's like if the rest of the band even like didn't have that much confidence in like what they were doing, Bradford just like is basically just 4 people worth of confidence.
Right, exactly. And then my second thing is I think it needs to be sweaty. Is my adjective I use, because like the whole concept of punk music is like music for the people, which means everyone can just get up and do it. There's a low barrier or bar of entry to punk music. And so I think the way then you differentiate yourself is you go out and say, this is how hard I am trying. I think Bradford absolutely does that as well.
I think there is a trap there. Mm-hmm. I think there is a misconception, and I did sort of like talk a bit about dynamics, but like the idea that you need to be as loud as you can, as aggressive as you can, as violent as you can, constantly all the time is a punk trap, I think.
Right.
So like I'm excited to see where the band goes. I think I guess I didn't really give my complete thoughts about the album. This isn't my favorite album.
Right. I'm shocked to learn this.
I think it's fairly static, like all the way through. There are a couple of times that it differentiates, but like, so like that idea, and especially this performance that we looked at, it's very loud all the way through.
Yeah.
There's not that much change. It just seems like a muddled mess of noise. Mm-hmm. And like, I think the most successful thing that's going on right now is the performance that Bradford is giving, not necessarily the performance that the rest of the band is giving.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Like I said, like Bradford kind of counts for 4 people,
right?
Because he is basically leading the performance by himself. So he's doing a lot of exaggerated movements and a lot of vocal screaming and that kind of stuff, but it's not really the music that is carrying the performance at this point.
Right. I would agree with that. I think more what I was going with when I was talking about sweaty as an adjective for the music is more like like punk kind of has a built-in filter for authenticity, where because it's music of the people, if it's too produced, if it's too planned or too well put together kind of thing, where it's like it feels like it's being infiltrated by someone, like an outsider kind of thing, even though it's music for outsiders. But if it's like being co-opted, I think that's a thing that that audience is very much not interested in. And so I feel like part of the authenticity of being like, I'm just an average person up here doing punk music is you're like, wow, look how hard I'm working kind of thing. Not necessarily how loud and how overwhelming my performance is, but more like, like bearing your soul kind of thing.
Yeah. So like, maybe I can get a little bit more like, as someone from the outside, when I say that I'm not a fan of this album, just because like it doesn't seem to have a lot of good, like, dynamic movement. It doesn't seem to have a lot of like conflict resolution. There's a couple songs that do that, but am I out of touch? Am I the snobby individual that is coming in from the outside saying that, this isn't actually good music because of this, and this? Am I the guy on the outside that is just being like, this isn't good?
Right. No, I don't think you're that person. I don't think the outsider mentality means like, oh, you can't have a different opinion about it, or it can't be, something that you particularly enjoy. I think
But I'm just trying to think. I'm just trying to think on the idea of authenticity in punk music. Yeah. Like what is the line that breaks authentic punk from sort of like produced punk?
See, and that's a really hard thing because there's that whole concept of selling out and stuff that Bradford talks about on Adorno, right? And I think it's like I'm gonna mess up this quote terribly, but there is a U.S. senator somewhere from years ago who was talking about some bill on restricting access to pornography, and they said, and then so someone said, well, how do you define it? And he said, I don't know how to define it, but I know it when I see it. And I feel like that's authenticity in punk, where people are just like, I couldn't tell you, but like when I know it's authentic or not authentic, I just know. And like I think that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like it's not necessarily something that you can put down in words, but like if there was an authentic punk band, this is certainly it.
They are it at this point, I would say. And my very last item, I think, that makes up this good live punk music trio that I'm coming up with here, is that they're provocative. And I think that's important with punk music. I think the whole idea of that, like, we are outsiders mentality in punk music is the idea that we're going to bring forward ideas that aren't necessarily part of music you would hear in other places, or at least in the most like commercially viable places. So like some of the topics on this album are definitely out there. Like, we talked about, whatever is exactly going on in the basement is not something you would normally hear about in a pop song. Whatever New Animals is supposed to be.
Yeah, I actually kind of just think like this alt horror indie rock, this weird creepy thing that they've produced is very different from punk music, or like at least traditional punk music. I do think that like even in the punk space, this album is trying to sort of like fish out an audience.
Yeah.
Kind of just like there is a new energy. There is a new feel and mood to this album that like, at least from most like commercial or like successful like classic punk that I've listened to or that kind of thing. Like I haven't heard this before.
Right. Yeah, that would make sense.
And there is definitely a new feel to this that does make it very authentic. It's definitely provocative.
Yes.
Because I think it is trying to creep people out. Like a lot of the ways that like maybe like metal would try to creep people out.
Yeah.
Or like to make a counterculture or like just make a negative response so that they can turn around and just give them the finger sort of thing.
Right.
It's like, you think this is bad. Well, it's not, because fuck you. That's why.
Right.
Sort of thing.
Yeah.
And there's definitely a lot of that here on this album. There's definitely a lot of that in the live performance. Like you think this is a bad show? Well, okay, leave.
Right.
Sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's like, if you don't like it, then you don't like it. Mm-hmm. And I think this is definitely trying to provoke that response so that people who are getting it or are getting the album can just like turn around and sort of tell those people that they're wrong. So I would definitely agree with the three pillars of live punk performance. I would say that Bradford definitely has gold medals in all of them.
Right. Excellent. Thank you. 3-time gold medalist in live punk music. I think that wraps up my thoughts on live.
Yeah.
And that may, in fact, wrap up our thoughts on the album. I don't know if I have anything else really to say.
It was definitely fun. Mm-hmm. I had a fun time listening to the album.
Yeah.
Like I said, I probably will not listen to this album again.
That's fair.
But I am definitely excited to go into Cryptograms. So maybe, if you wanted, could you give me a little teaser?
Oh, okay. I'll try. This is completely off the cuff, but I'll try and give you a teaser into Cryptograms. If you enjoyed bass-led songs that are about groove being laid down and then having things filter in and out and change around it, but with just a little bit more song structure and much cleaner vocals, I think you'll really like Cryptograms.
So we can look forward to that in the next episode.
Yes.
And until then, have a wonderful day.
Take care, and we will see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.